And good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. How are we doing? I'd like to introduce you to the inaugural edition of the Bluebird on Your Shoulder podcast. It's just a group of three regular guys who have regular thoughts about big things. The podcast will mostly be political in its stance. Be prepared or don't tune in. We all enjoy politics. We all enjoy America. It's a wonderful thing. My name is Ryan. Uh, just an old regular guy that does old regular things. Good old middle class job, middle class life, middle class working blue collar guy. So nothing special, nothing unique, and definitely nothing elitist about me.
My name is Josh. I am a retired staff sergeant from the Army. Um, I do have my own concealed carry. I believe in fiscal conservatism, but socially, I am a liberal. Um, and I believe in civic activism and our individual civic duty to be informed about who we cast votes for.
My name is also Josh. I am probably the most moderate of the three of us. I have voted both sides of the aisle several times. Just a regular old dude, just trying to get some information out to some people so they can be better informed of what's really going on. With that being said, we are on the brink, just a few days out now, of a regime change in our country. Inauguration day being Monday. And with that, I would like to highlight some of the day one promises that Trump has been talking about that he's going to do as soon as he gets in. And I found that it was very similar to his first time in. And those are, building the wall and mass deportation, drill for the oil, his tariffs, of course. And one major one this time around is the trans rights. Specifically, the House just passed a bill that's got to go to Senate regarding trans in sports. And the first time you could switch that out with the prosecution of Hillary Clinton or lack thereof.
Oh,
Yeah,
pretty good. You bring up massive mass deportation as being quite a highlight. Definitely was a motivating factor in the election. A lot of exit polling showed that to be the truth. I think that's interesting. I'm curious as to if it is something he will actually attempt to do. I've seen some information on sourced, on verified that the border czar has tempered expectations amongst Republicans in politics that it's not going to happen the way that they want it to. It should be really interesting. I think personally, mass deportations will probably shatter the economy. The amount of workforce that you would take out, large groups of farmers have expressed concerns about a big portion of their labor force. So I think that's a really interesting promise. It's something his base really, really wants. So having the things he may actually try to accomplish, I quite wonder if this will be one of them.
I think he's going to try. He just appointed his personal, like the Secret Service that's in charge of watching over him. They just moved him into a position as far as like basically like the borders are. Um, and they tried the first time to do mass deportation, was unsuccessful, mainly because they don't have the funds for it. They're not going to have the funds for it this time around, and they're just undermanned. They're going to be undermanned this time around. So I just really don't see that one ever getting done. Much like, he touted the wall and how much they got done. I think of all of what they did, I believe I read that most of it was mainly repairing old broken material and putting it up with, just a new steel barrier. So you're really not doing anything there other than repairs. I think of all the miles that they did, only like 18 miles was new.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, the way I see it kind of going down is I bet that he will try to reclass a lot of immigrants and illegals so that it looks like he's done a lot, but in reality, he's basically just moved them from one column to another.
It's just fluff.
Yep. That's mostly what I see, because if we look at it, the things that he's proposing, and with the economy already kind of looking at like bracing itself for a recession, a 25% tariff on all goods that are imported to our country, getting rid of 11 million of our people that are good, cheap labor, and what was the other one? Oh, and then trying to limit how much oil is coming into our country versus going out is just not going to help anything. So if we're not careful, we are going to see not only a recession, but one that involves collapsing industries in America.
I,
Most of
I fully agree with that. I think it's really interesting trying to limit the importation of oil. Being though that the importation of oil is the basis of the petrodollar,
right,
which is the core of the dollar's strength and the reason it's globally recognized currency. So that in itself leads to one of my overall thoughts that quite often this man is clueless to the realities of the things he talks about. Um, I think in the deportation conversation, something that really got interesting was the base rallying against H-1B visas.
Mm.
And it created sort of some tension in their base, it appeared, um, especially in the social media platforms like X, where Elon Musk heavily uses H-1B visas in his
Yeah.
companies and always has, and
Yeah,
sees
he
great
actually
value in
said
them.
something a week or so ago after Trump was really touting the mass deportation, where he said something about, they got to go. But then, like a week after he said that, he said something about that we can't, because he noticed that he would have his own labor shortage of like 10% too short. So,
It is
it's
interesting.
they got
It's
to get they got to get away from the rhetoric of they're gonna come take our jobs and all of that. And I mean, let's be honest, as Americans that have, the three of us at least have decent jobs, if we're worried about someone who, as they say, is unskilled and uneducated coming to take our jobs, we need to get better skills.
that's
which
true.
is
And then the other side of the coin to them fighting against H-1B visas is the reason it's so predominant in medicine, tech, which are the two areas that the high-end H-1B visas are consistently and commonly used, is because the education in those countries are simply better.
Can you
Uh,
explain for the folks that are watching what that visa is, in case they're new to this realm of thing?
so basically, that visa
Because it's
is
not just a regular visa. So,
it's not, it allows you to be classified as a high skilled worker. And it's you are allowed into the country because of your ability to do something that is unique or at a level at which we don't have enough of. It's actually very similar to the basis in which most other countries would allow immigration into their country as well.
yeah.
Like if I wanted to become a German or immigrate to Germany, I would have to show a skill that I could bring to the table that they don't have enough of. So it's a very similar reality to that, and that's a very layman way to put it. There's lots of rules and regulations behind them. But it's just really interesting that to me, it has appeared that a lot of Americans have gone soft and become insecure. And they consistently think that they're not good enough or they won't be good enough, or they're replacing us with this or they're replacing us with that or they're replacing us with this. And I often ask myself the question, what are you doing to not be replaced? I personally in my life have done a lot of things to make sure I wasn't replaced. And I've never personally felt like the color of my skin was the reason I was going to be replaced. And that seems to be very common to the narrative. And I think why immigration on both sides of the coin now, illegal, illegal immigration of typically low skill, cheap labor, and high end immigration of extremely skilled labor. And now we don't like either one of them. And we want it to go to all of us, with us traditionally meaning white people.
White men.
At least in my opinion, they will rail against that if you're on that side all day, but at the end of the day, from everything I've seen, that's the core, the great replacement theory, which is almost pure playbook propaganda.
Well, when
Used
people struggle, it's easy to get them to focus on blaming somebody else instead of challenging themselves to improve um, or move forward with them in mind instead of trying to focus on other people. One of the Going back to the special visa, probably the biggest one that most people would know is Albert Einstein. He was not American.
Yeah.
And we brought him over under that kind of visa program. We've also brought in uh, political refugees from other countries that they classify under those. A few years back, I actually got to meet one that came over on the top tier class of that visa, because at the age of, I want to say 11, he had hacked into NASA's mainframe and downloaded the schematics for the shuttle, the first big shuttle that we had made, and to put up on his wall. If you've ever seen the show Scorpion, the opening and the main character are actually kind of modeled after him, and his program is one that actually looks to find geniuses to develop them into a usable product here in America. So he recruits young kids, he matches them and their family with people that help with making sure that someone who comes across as autistic or with social challenges is able to use their genius in a productive way. Pretty cool stuff.
It is. It's a reminder of the America I grew up in, was always looking for embracing and enjoying the best and the brightest.
Yeah,
And
I
it
mean, we're literally
wasn't
known as a melting pot. So, like, why are we trying to make that melting pot a white pot?
right. I would rather the greatness be here than be somewhere else.
And that's always my key. Like, why are we even talking about these visas? Number one, it's a small population of people that actually get those visas. Number two, why would we shun brilliant minds to make the biggest improvements in our country so that the problems that we are struggling with isn't reduced down to race or, you know, people being afraid of others that are trying to improve their lives.
I think the biggest challenge with that is he and his followers don't understand that it is actually a very small, minute percentage of immigrants that come over are bad. We'll just leave it at that, and he just portrays it, and then they believe him that they're all violent, rapists, thieves, not good, no help.
Well, and that's
And I
Yeah.
mean, me personally, I mean, being a little more moderate, like, yeah, I want you to come over legally, you know. I mean, I only think that's fair. Like, I've got a couple of buddies that live down in Florida that are, Hispanic, and they said in their community, one of the things during election time that they talked about a lot was nobody took into account that they came over legally, and one of the things that ticked them off the most was the ones that were coming over illegally and getting more help than what they are as a citizen. So
well, and
I
the
definitely think that played
the
into
cost
it,
of an immigrant coming over legally is pretty large. I mean, from $5,000 to $20,000 is usually kind of the average of what it costs for you to come over legally. And the lottery system leaves a lot of people without a place to be. And so that's why I always focus the conversation on why aren't we investing in streamlining those processes so that we're able to facilitate bringing people in legally instead of making them all wait in line when they're running from something in their old country.
I think that's really key, right? I think like I could agree. I could agree that we want legal immigration, right? I can settle in that and I can be okay with that. But I also believe that the system needs to be fixed for that to even be
Right.
possible,
Right.
for that to
100%.
even be theoretic, right? So, and if we can acknowledge the fact that we are short 20 million laborers, right? Because we have moved to a tech
Yeah.
based economy, right? Where you do kind of have to have some sort of skill, right? Higher end skill to be hyper successful. And we have lost industry jobs. I will say that, industrial jobs have slowly disappeared, right?
Yeah.
For variant reasons that I'm not going to get into. However, to not admit that we are short laborers, whether that be whatever you want to call it, laziness that the people won't do it because I believe the people are here, right? However, there's a deficiency, and we need a way to fill that deficiency, and we can really truly rotate back why illegal immigration exists, from where it comes from. And you can pinpoint something that most MAGA people would really hate to know is reality, but we abolished slavery and the amount of illegal immigration out of Mexico skyrocketed and we allowed it. I wonder why that is. Did we lose a bunch of free labor or something? Is that maybe what happened? So I think that's a really interesting take. You had mentioned that Hispanic communities traditionally, and I am around Hispanic communities in my work a lot as well, and I've heard that reminisced or repeated often as they get all this help. That's fairly factually untrue. It is more state dependent. It's not a federal thing. So, yes, there are states where they do receive quite a lot of help, but that's a state issue. That's a state determination. And if you truly understand the Constitution of the United States, the states have the right to do that
Yeah.
because each state in its way is its own independent country. And then 50 independent countries come together and create the federal.
Right.
And so the state of New York may give illegal immigrants a lot of help. The state of Texas definitely doesn't.
Right.
Right.
The state of Florida definitely doesn't.
Yeah, but they use that
So
to play off of, like, I was talking with Josh about it one night, him being a vet, is that he does kudos to him because it worked. He does a really good job of playing that up to they're leaving our veterans on the streets as if he cares about them while he's making fun of them at a speech, an hour later. He's saying, well, they're kicking our veterans out onto the streets and not helping them and housing them in these hotels and all that. And it's, again, like you said, it's a state thing. But it's whatever comes out of his mouth is gospel to these people.
That's very
It's like they
factually
failed to
true.
think for themselves. It's whatever the personalities on Fox say is truth, and everything else is anything bad that's said about them is not true, and they defer and deflect because they have nothing to say back to it.
For a long time I was scared of Fox News for the reason you said, and I think that getting absolutely shattered by the defamation suit. Forgetting the name right now, the Dominion voting,
Yes,
and
yeah,
having to pay out quite a bit of money there. There was a pivot. I think that the bigger danger in that is it is gospel. You're right, but it's not just his words that are gospel. It's people like Cat Turd on
yeah,
Twitter. And they
yeah,
believe that what he says is gospel, and somehow he knows because he's got Trump's cell phone number and he talks to him every day.
right.
Or like, what is the social media has created a world where people think opinions are facts, and
Well,
they're
and
they're
it's all
presented
based
that
in
way.
it's all based in confirmation bias. So they've
Yeah,
chosen to regress into a tribal mindset where it's us versus them. And so then they've been fed enough of this where they believe that that's true. So then they reinforce it with confirmation bias by seeking out that
Cat
information.
turd.
Yep. To make them sound themselves feel better
Right.
because it reduces their anxiety about what's happening in their life.
No,
yeah,
absolutely,
and
absolutely, and it's what you said. There's a lot of fear tactic at play, right? And that's what I don't understand. I don't remember Americans being so afraid and so scared. I grew up in a country where we took on the world and won
twice.
twice. We took on communism and won. We didn't back down to anything. We weren't afraid of anything. We didn't back down to anything. We had pride in ourselves, which in turn turned into pride in our country and pride in our accomplishments and but we had pride in ourselves. We had pride that we were Americans. And it feels like the pro America party and the rah rah, shish boom USA party are the least proud of being Americans, the most scared of Americans, and ones that should World War II have been today, we might not be able to win it because they're too afraid that the brown soldier next to them is there to take their gun. I don't know. It's a very weird reality that we have found. It's a paradox that I never thought I would see in this country.
Well, and
Like I
I
said,
think we
I
saw some
grew
of
up.
that. I think we saw some of that in Vietnam, where in Vietnam it changed warfare into a guerrilla style warfare, and after that, we had 9/11, and right when we turned into adults, and so 13
Well,
people.
Desert Storm and then
Oh well.
9/11, but yeah, I
No,
mean,
we didn't turn into adults in Desert Storm. I don't
no,
know
we
when I
were
got turned
kids.
into.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
we were
I'm
kids.
still waiting to turn into an adult now, so I'll let you know when that happens.
so 13 people were able to make an attack on America that felt like it crippled us. And that was the beginning of that fear. And people used it as a way to try to bring America together and celebrate, being an American and supporting each other. But then it turned into privatized war, and then the war machine kept our economy going right up until deregulation crippled us in housing, which is pretty much the core of the American dream. I'm a real estate agent. So when you see that, you see people feel like they can't reach that potential anymore. And I think all of that together has really bred a type of nationalism that is afraid. And I think that's what you're getting at.
A fear-based nationalism. It's
Yep.
absolutely correct. So, and they've made you afraid so they can abuse that privilege to
Well,
manipulate you.
abuse workers. They abuse workers and they take advantage of a system that holds, those lesser off down. So if you're not a millionaire, if you're not jumping into, the way to scramble and grab a bunch of money by, using other people, then you're going to be used. And that's what we're seeing. It's everybody is struggling because they don't realize that the people that are rich that they're idolizing is using them and taking advantage of their work, their value. And that's where the core of America's devaluing of our core principles is coming from.
And I think that kind of plays right into one of his promises, with the tariffs of, like you said, nationalism of, trying to, buy American and, American labor and all that. Like I remember growing up, my father being a union worker,
Mm-hmm.
when Sears was around, it was buy Craftsman, it's American made, don't buy the other stuff, same with TVs and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, support the laborers here type thing, make sure they got a job. And it's, I mean, you guys, you can look it up. Like it didn't work the last time. And he's talking about the same exact percentages and whatnot. The jobs didn't come back
Mm-hmm.
because the people that own it, his buddies, they like their money. They keep their money overseas. They don't bring the labor back and they pay way less taxes keeping their money overseas. So why would they bring their money back over here?
Right. Well, I mean, there's another facet to that that I don't think a lot of people understand is one of the major problems with returning most industry to America is we no longer create the input for
Correct.
those industries anymore either.
Right.
So we couldn't have massive textile industry like we used to because we don't produce cotton at anywhere near the level we used to. So we don't have the raw inputs to
Right.
perform in a lot of these industries because we have pivoted to a tech slash military
Yep.
economy. And food and agriculture still exists here and it always will exist here. And I think farming will continue to be one of the cornerstones of America forever. But we make a bulk of our money off our oil and selling it because we must have drill, but yet we're producing more oil today than he ever did.
Mm-hmm.
We just export it, and that's one of the other big fallacies that always came through is we were energy independent under Trump, and in reality, is we've depends on whether you're accepting the technicality or not. So energy independent means that we are exporting more than we are importing for use. That's what it means, and we've never done that with oil,
Well, and that's
which
and
is
that's
what
one of
most
the
people think. The technicality comes that plastics are an oil byproduct, and we
mhm.
do export so much of that petroleum based product that they said we're energy independent. Well,
Well,
sure. If
and
you add
so
plastic into it, we're independent in that category. However, if we're subcategory oil, never have and
yeah,
never will be because we can sell ours for more than we buy theirs for.
because of
And
the
so
use.
it's
But
net
but
profit.
it's also the type of oil.
Yeah.
So for
Correct.
our vehicles, we want the type of oil that comes from the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
For textiles and plastics and things, it's we extract a dirtier oil in America, and then that's where we ship it. The problem with the term energy independent is that people feel like that means that we're self-sufficient. And in a military sense, when we're not energy independent and we're depending on, you know, potential enemies, then that lie can bring a false sense of security. And we don't realize that Dubai exists as one of the most, or as the most modern city that has ever existed, because of our need for that type of oil.
Well, I don't know if it's true anymore. I do know at one point within the last 10 years, for sure, last 10 years, um, it was said that 80% of the oil that we get is from Venezuela anyway, not the Middle East. I don't know if that's still true or not, but
No,
No,
we're definitely way too in bed with the Saudis. I would assume that a majority of our oil actually comes from the Saudis. There is Venezuela does produce oil. I think a lot of that ends up being sold to Russia. Russia also produces a lot of oil too, though, which is why now it's OPEC plus.
right.
So if you want to do some research independently on your own on this topic, looking into OPEC plus and why they use them and why our gas prices are actually more so determined by them than anything we can do, because they set the price of oil on the open market because they control 90+% of the
well,
total oil.
because they can then flood the market if they're not getting it the way that they want it, then they'll flood the market with oil and tank the price.
Mhm.
You know, we had to negotiate with them to reduce the amount of oil that they were producing in order to get oil above $0 during COVID.
Oh no, I'm fully aware. I
And
actually made a lot of money off of $1 barrel of
Oh
oils,
yeah,
the old USO, and we'll leave it at that. But I do think you brought up a lot of points. Like he made a lot of promises, and a lot of them are the same because obviously they didn't get accomplished. And maybe we should go over some of those promises that his supporters were promised this last time and what really ended up happening there. They think everything happened.
right. Yeah,
yeah,
and he caused everything good that happened before and after. In some of his promises that they think that we accomplished was the mass deportation that we just talked about, ending birthright citizenship, which is a cornerstone of our Constitution. Those who are born here are American, and to say otherwise is racist and bigoted.
yes, especially when they, the birther theory of Obama was, oh, he's not American because he wasn't born on American soil. You literally just contradicted yourself then with these children of immigrants that were born here. Those children are American.
Right.
Well, for the everyday man, let's just throw it out there. If we had ended birthright citizenship, Kobe Bryant wouldn't have been an American.
Oof. Yeah.
So that's all there is.
Is it
Because
too soon to say he might still be alive
that
then?
birthright citizenship carries to the American military basis where Kobe was born.
Yes.
Mhm.
100%.
So
And Shaq.
if yeah, if we didn't have birthright citizenship, Kobe Bryant would not have been American. And
Yep.
I
And
don't
Shaq.
know very many Americans who would be okay with Kobe not being American. That's all I gotta say. Rest in peace, good sir. So, but yeah, them first term promises, they were fairly empty. Um,
Yeah, I mean the biggest one, is the prosecution of Hillary. Obviously, she didn't even have an indictment or anything on her where, he's now a 34-time convicted felon.
Yeah, they had already beat that dead horse down, and they just felt like
Yeah, when the
being
own Republican Party does their own investigation because the initial one didn't come how they want it, and then they come to find that they don't have anything, and then he still wants to beat that drum, like,
well, because his
and now
people
he's going to
see
pardon all these January 6th people too. So,
yeah.
see
so
that one.
that is on his first
Yeah,
100 days promises right now, is to pardon everyone who is convicted of January 6th.
Yep.
yeah, because it was a bunch of fine people on a
Yeah,
tour walk or
they were
something,
his
right?
supporters. If you're in
So
support of things,
I'm fully not did not see what I thought I would see. I didn't watch it on TV live. I didn't see it happen. I definitely have never experienced gaslighting to the level in which MAGA does it. And the weird part is I don't think they know they're doing it.
Now, most
I
most people don't understand, number one, confirmation bias and how that can create a sense of security by just going with the crowd that you're in, and
Mhm.
because you guys are right and you're the winners. So that type of mentality can lead you into just believing whatever your side says. And they've done a very good job of using disinformation in order to create this environment where tribalism is at an all-time high, to the point where I, as a soldier, fear violence, because I've never seen this type of division anywhere without it devolving into some form of violence.
Well, I think in certain ways it has already started to devolve in
Well,
violence.
yeah,
So,
January 6th was definitely violent.
January 6th was extreme violence. Somebody did take a shot at this man. That was
Mm-hmm.
violent. Uh, Luigi
Maybe.
definitely took that dude out. The CEO, that's violence. And I think that you are
Mm-hmm.
right that a lot of that tribalism that have been created in this country is leaving people without options because you're either with us or you're against us, and there's no in between.
Yep.
There's
And all the
no
while,
longer
we're all being pushed down on from the top. So
correct.
it keeps everybody feeling more contained, and that buildup is what we're starting to see, the cracks and the violence starting to happen.
When the crazy
Well,
thing is, when in this country has anything ever been accomplished without violence? Anything
um,
major is involved violence.
I
Yeah.
mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, historically, that's true. I mean, every major, for the most part, event was precluded or postcluded by
Yeah, that's
violence.
what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout history, I think that's part of the reality that human beings are an animal and a member of the animal kingdom and a pack mammal and
Yeah,
territorial and much more familiar to dogs and wolves than much other things, but yet we do have a lot of primate qualities, and it's very interesting the amount of sociology that can go into why it happens. It's, I think, at a boiling point different than ever now because of the most people didn't read the news. Most
yeah,
people didn't watch the news for many, many longs. And most of the people who did voted. Most of the people who didn't. The
Right.
electorate used to be 60% of eligible voters on a good election. Now it's 73% of eligible voters in a good election. And now the news is opinions on Instagram, X, Facebook, um, TikTok,
yeah, no,
and
yeah,
all of this, right? All of this is legitimate and valid. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there's certain aspects of it where um, you see now the capitulation of Zuckerberg because he's pretty sure this man's going to put him in prison if he doesn't capitulate, right?
Yeah.
And there's a common thread in the liberal. What do they say? I agree with it. I would never do it, so I don't pay as much attention to it. But in the liberal strongholds, I see it quite often as like no conformity before, like don't conform before they even try to make you. And that's what Zuckerberg did, and that's what the morning show people, the Joe show.
Um,
I don't watch a lot of that stuff, but he went and capitulated. And this is how you give power to. I'm not going to use all the trigger words that just piss everybody off, but at the end of the day, nobody can disagree that this is an authoritative strongman
yes.
that a bunch of men had to vote for because they needed daddy.
So, yeah,
And
they
I
want to
think
feel
that
strong.
I think people who vote, if you voted for him and you're watching this, you need to understand that that's what you did. You put your thumb in your mouth, you got your passy and blankie, and you voted for the strong man because you're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
That couldn't be me. That's
Right.
all I can say is that that couldn't be me. I die for it if I had to because I believe in it. I believe in the vision of the founders. I believe in the great experiment that is the democracy of the United States and the constitutional republic. Cool, call it what you will. A little bit of Athens, little bit of Rome.
A little bit of Greece.
Yeah, a little bit of, right. We got a little bit of everything here, and we kind of do it all. We're somewhat democratic, somewhat constitutional, and somewhat republic, and that's why we're a great experiment. And I think we are often disillusioned to I now saw 50 and 40 and 50 and 60-year-old men who needed their daddy. And at one point in time, this country was founded by people who the average age of were 22. And I think a lot of people don't realize our founders were not old men.
Yeah.
They were
Well,
young men.
and if we look at, especially because, one of the biggest parts after the economy is people are afraid of when they get old and how long they're going to have to work through the retirement. And we're seeing a large change, start to come to fruition because people with 401ks and not pensions are starting to become the majority. And that is scary because there are a lot of people that need that $1,000 Social Security payment just to be able to supplement the only $500,000 that they have to live 15 years on. So and while the Social Security conversation is very complex and not as dire as the right tries to make it look, but also not as good as the left wants to make it. I think that when we don't have those honest conversations and people don't recognize their fear, then they're more apt to try to blame, try to feel strong instead of be strong. They always talk about every generation talks about the younger generation about how fucked how messed up they are. And
thank God for editing.
I know, right? So every older generation sits there and tries to say that the younger generation is the problem because they don't want to recognize the fact that they created that problem that there is now affecting them and they don't have the power anymore to fix it.
Not necessarily so much they created it, but they allowed it to be created by the powers to be.
Well,
So very few people are actually in power, have any form of real power.
No,
So
and
it's a very select group of people that none of us are a part of. That's reality. That the majority of us Americans out here, 99 point, they say the 1% is not even 1% people that have the power. It's like 0.2% that have the power.
Yeah,
and we don't, it ain't us. And they convince you that they're not the enemy.
Yeah.
I'm your enemy because I don't like orange Mussolini. Right? I'm not, that's why I'm your enemy, because I don't think a guy like that should represent our country. However,
I don't think somebody that was held liable for raping somebody should ever be in a position where they represent a body of people.
Yeah, when did I remember growing up and even raising my son, like I remember him all through elementary school was he either wanted to be the president of the United States or a firefighter. Like, when did that position ever? I mean, we know when 2016 is when it happened, to where it was no longer someone that you could look up to. Even George W. Bush. Say what you want about him. Say, a lot of people said he was stupid, said he was a horrible president, bad economy that Obama inherited, all that stuff. But at least he was presidential.
He is a great American. I voted for W. Bush both times because of the way that he approached being president was with humility. Mm-hmm. He recognizes the things that he didn't do right. I've listened to some interviews with him and Barack Obama together talking because they are friends, and he recognizes some of the shortfalls that he had, just as President Carter did before he died.
I mean, ultimately, right? They all have to have some form of respect for them. That's a really small club.
Yeah.
That's a really small club of people who have run the free world.
Yeah.
And it's there is an admiration, and you are right. Be it what he was presidential.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can like or dislike Obama, but you cannot say that he didn't actually take the time to think about the words that came out of his mouth and the power that they carried solely because his title was President of the United States of
Right.
America.
And
Therefore,
and his job wasn't to be powerful. His job was to represent and serve us.
correct. Well,
That's where we fell.
in my work, it's a lot. I'm in leadership roles, and often I'm asked, "What's it feel like to be the boss?" Or "How come you don't flex that you're the boss?" And it's a really simple reality. I don't have to. I am the boss. But that comes with more responsibilities than it does privileges. I
Yeah,
promise you. Why would I
definitely.
want to beat my chest that I'm now responsible for the livelihoods and families of all of these people? If I don't guide them correctly or take them to the right places, they're not going to be able to feed their family. That's a
Yeah.
lot of pressure. And this is just for a mid-sized company, right? Like I'm not now we're talking about the power and weight of making sure that every American citizen can feed their family.
Talking
That
about 350 million people, and not only that, but most of our aid goes towards, or most of the money that we send overseas goes to aid those populations that would die otherwise, and that would or destabilize an area that would create a deficit in what we need in order for our economy to run.
Mhm.
And so when we're talking about being xenophobic and stop sending money overseas, stop supporting these countries that we call our allies, when we do that, we are destabilizing the world. And without that, we don't have the economy where anybody could make sure that 350 million people are gainfully employed and
Mhm.
trying to reach the American dream.
Well,
Yeah, I
let's
think
clarify something with that though. Like, let's just use Ukraine before we get into our best and worst because we need to wrap up here soon. But people are very disillusioned that when we say we sent $350 million over to Ukraine for aid, that wasn't cold hard cash. That was they have to put a price tag on ammo and weapons and things like that. That the right just they
yeah,
see
it's
dollars
a
and think
tad bit more than
sent a
350
duffel
million,
bag
but
full of money over there. Like,
Well, and being someone who has been in a war torn country and seeing those families that have been helped by our aid, um, that is something that we as Americans should take a lot of pride in, and I don't think that we do anymore. Um, our war machine is so much less important than our foreign aid, as far as being able to help those without and stabilize areas that they live so they don't have to come here.
right.
We're
Ultimately, right, it's talk softly, which is our aid, with a big stick, which is our
yep,
military.
yep, yep.
And pound for pound, the right attacks the military quite a lot now, and that's growing up in the America I grew up in. That's mind blowing.
yes,
You hear about party switching, and they don't want to accept that that's because Democrats were the slaveholders, and Democrats, even though the parties have it's okay. Democrats are the slaveholders. How come that whole area of the country only votes red? But we'll leave it alone. But reality is they don't want to accept that party shift happens, right? And it obviously did. Well, you're watching party shift happen again now. Now all of a sudden, the left are the pro-military party, and the right are the anti-military party, and it makes my head explode.
Well, that's because the right was pro military in order to be forceful, powerful, and forceful going out. Now that we're coming back, now that veterans are coming home and we're messed up and injured and need to be recognized for the oath and the service that they did. And that's where the left is shining by putting a bunch of money into the VA and benefits for veterans so that they can get an education, they can get the help that they need. I've served on 3 different boards of nonprofits that have been mostly liberal that really did great work for not only those veterans that have come home and need help, but also for young soldiers who fall into desperate times because they're trying to split their service with working at home for those reservists and National Guardsmen. And so when those groups are able to supplement that to keep them okay so that they can serve and fight the fight.
No, 100%. And I think that that brings me to like we're in this reality now. I'm obviously not a fan. I didn't vote for him. You couldn't pay me to vote for him. I'd vote for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich before I would vote for him. And I'll put that out there outright, and I'll have that conversation with anyone who wants to. However, he is in 4 days going to be the president of the United States of America again. And therefore, I don't want him to fail.
Right.
I don't want to be right. I want to be wrong. I want them to be right. I want him to prove me wrong because he fails, America fails, and I don't want America to fail.
Right.
And I think that we're left in a realm now where we have the best case scenario is honestly in a lot of ways that the Senate does their job on this first round of base pleasing nominations. And there's a part of me that believes that's actually all they are, people they know are not going to get through, but they're going to be able to say, hey, we tried for you and it didn't happen. It's honestly very interesting. The chief of staff is definitely got deep Bush ties. Very influential in the Bush family, worked with the Bush family for a long time. It's now going to be his chief of staff. And last time he did surround himself by traditional politicians. And if he can continue to surround himself, get the Senate does their job, doesn't confirm this clown car full of people who may or may not be qualified to do the job. There's a couple I think are qualified to do the job. There's a couple that absolutely are not qualified for the jobs they're up for. Cash Patel comes to mind. I don't know enough about Pete other than he's got Crusader tattoos, and I'm all for the freedom to be a Christian. I'm all for that, right? Definitely all for that, but a Crusader and a Christian are 2 different things. This man believes he's a soldier of God. Well, we're not putting you in the position when they're trying to put you in to be a soldier of God. We're putting you in charge of the soldiers of America. It's a greatly different thing. But if we do block that confirmation and we do have to round up, which is what I do think will happen, and we do put regular people who know the systems and know the levers and know they're qualified to do the job. They're qualified to sit and have the conversations with the foreign ambassadors that they need to have. They know how the levers and pulleys of globalism works because it's a global economy. I think that's best case scenario is kind of what happened the first time is he wanted to do some wacky stuff. The Jack Smith report, get a chance, read it. Kind of wacky stuff he really wanted to do. We had people around him that were like, Donald, you can't do that, bro.
Yeah.
Like you can want to do it, but you can't actually do it.
Well, and
my problem is having somebody in office that wants to do it.
Well, and I would argue with you that there was a lot of people that were yes men before, and this time he actually has a close body of real politicians, people that have been doing this and understand the minutia around it in order to get things done the right way, according to the Constitution.
Right. So I think worst case scenario is all of the confirmations happen as nominated thus far. I think that the cryptocurrency scheme of
It is.
Doge,
Yeah.
because that's what it is. This is
Yep.
some weird crypto scheme um, of Doge, right? Why is that the moniker, right? Why did we do that? It's also that man owns a lot of, it's really weird, right? What qualifies the dude who I know a lot of you now idolize almost more than you idolize the dreamsicle? Um, that he um is this relative genius who creates all of these great products and innovations and moves it. No, other people create these products and innovations, and then he buys it or steals it from them.
Yep.
And then he doesn't actually do a good job at running any of the companies, because if you look at all of his companies before, they all failed until somebody else took over. If you look at Tesla, it failed until he put somebody else in charge.
Yeah.
In a way, he's very much like Donald in that everyone says Donald was a successful businessman. He was never a successman businessman.
No.
He had a lot of money from his silver spoon. Who bankrupts a casino?
Yeah.
Okay. And we'll
Well,
stop there and leave it at that. But his daughter, Ivanka, is a very successful businesswoman.
and
She is
smart.
the reason that the Trump empire is what it is. Daddy had money. Ivanka had the brains
Yeah.
to handle it.
Well, and that's what I would say the same thing about Mr. Musk is that he had money, he comes from money, and he was able to join with people that had good ideas because he could see the potential in that. So that's where I would say that um, he is a great investor in potential. So and honestly the best thing that he can do is and what he does do is he goes in and he learns it. He learns everything about the company and the product. And a lot of people report, he sleeps in the office and he works 80 hours a week. And he does that just so that he knows enough to hire somebody who knows better than him. And that
Ultimately, I don't think he's dumb. I think he's brilliant. I think he's a brilliant man. I really do. And I think that some of his visions are good.
no,
I think we should
Mars
go to
is
Mars.
admirable.
Yeah, I think we should go to Mars.
No.
I think that SpaceX is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. And then I also think that he is in no way, shape, or form qualified to tell me that the Department of Education shouldn't exist.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll save that topic for
Yeah,
another podcast.
That's gonna be a good one.
that's a real good leave off there. Everyone, thanks for watching. This is our, pilot episode. We'll be doing an episode a week. Hopefully, we can get some steam rolling going. We can go live and incorporate a chat. So, again, thank you for watching. We'll see you next week. Probably talk about what happens on Monday, Inauguration Day, and some other things. Smash the like button for us. We'll throw some hashtags and emails so you can get us some topics you might like to hear. If you know who we are and got our contacts, also let us know there and we can get it on there for you. See you next week.
All right. Awesome. And remember, we'll always be the blue bird on your shoulder.
Whispering in your ear.